Heidi, welcome. Thank you so much for being here to speak to everybody about your recovery.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
And could we start by you telling people a little about who you are, where you are, what you do?
Yeah, so my name is Heidi, and currently I'm a full-time yoga teacher. And I started working with Nadia, about 3 years ago.
Mhm.
I'm 28 now, but I would say my official recovery age was 26.
Mhm.
I've kind of been in the plasticity world for a few years before then. Um, So yeah, life's been pretty good. Um, I'm currently living in Alabama,
Mhm.
and I have a little dog and a little cat.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Heidi. So, 3 years ago, when you came to me, what were
Mhm.
you dealing with in mind and body? Why did you land with this work, Heidi? What were you working with?
So I would have to count everything that I had,
Mhm.
but I had about 8 or 10 different things going on in my body.
Mhm.
So I had chronic fatigue,
Yes.
I had migraine, fibromyalgia, POTS syndrome,
Mhm.
dysautonomia, sleep issues, bunch of allergies, really just like anything that could go wrong did.
I really understand. I also wore the t-shirt, so I hear you. Really, really tough to have so many things in the body feeling so alarming. What had you tried to recover before we started working together?
I tried the medicine route,
Hmm.
just medicated away. That didn't work. I tried the food route.
Yes.
So eliminating all the foods and only eating certain ones,
Yeah.
and that didn't work.
Hmm.
Um, and aside from that, that was about it. And I stumbled upon kind of just the neuroplasticity world just by accident.
Okay.
And that was kind of my last ditch effort.
Me too, by the way. I think it's a lot of ours. We're like, well, everything else has failed. I wonder what the
Yeah,
thing is. Did you come from DNRS? Were you doing that before?
I did. Yep.
Yeah, and what was that like for you?
Um, I didn't like it
Hmm.
personally. I'm sure that there's some people out there it had helped, but I didn't. I think it was way too structured and impersonal.
Yes.
And for me personally, it felt like we were overriding things
Yes,
instead of working with them.
indeed.
And you don't really get to override that type of emotion.
Good noticing. I remember that even from 3 years ago in our first session, you saying it feels like I'm worrying over things. But then
Mhm.
when I asked you what was happening in your body, you did not know. So
Yep.
yeah, there's that sense, because you're highly sensitive and very intuitive, you knew
Mhm.
something wasn't quite right, but you didn't know what yet. Okay.
Right.
Yeah. What attracted you to this way of working?
Honestly, I saw
Hmm.
you specifically post in a Facebook group I was in,
Yes.
and the message you wrote was so compassionate.
Hmm.
And I was just thinking like, well, where is that in DNRS?
Yeah.
And I felt just on a deep level that something compassion based
Yes.
of like treating yourself like a human felt like it was going to be a lot more healing.
I'm glad, Heidi, that is your wisdom. Good.
Yeah.
I'm glad.
Hmm.
Our approach was kind of slow and steady and centered around your relationship with yourself and compassion as the core pillar of what we did. How was that for you to shift your focus to that instead of being results focused, to be stabilization and nourishment focused?
It felt foreign because it was the first time in my life I had done that.
How is it to acknowledge that was the first time that you had turned towards with kind of care and nourishment?
It feels a little bit humbling.
Mhm.
And at the same time, I just wasn't taught that. And I think a
Yes.
lot of people aren't. And it's also never too late to learn it.
Thank you. I'm so glad you said that, Heidi, because the vast majority of people I work with, myself included, we weren't shown.
Mm-hmm.
So we tend to approach our recovery like the American government with shock and awe, and it scares everything in us even more.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's so different to start to practice compassion. And yes, it's never too late.
I
It
mean,
is
you could be age 70
truly, my eldest client
or
was
80.
3.
Yeah. I
Yeah,
mean, it's literally never too late to start over and do things differently.
indeed. Thank you, love. You really seized on that when we started working together. I don't know if you remember, the first invitation I gave you was a meditation to reconnect mind and body a little and to start to notice where you felt sensations and symptoms in your body and what you might be feeling. And you came back in our next session, you were like, whoa, there's things going on.
Yeah.
What was it like to start to reconnect a little?
I think if I had to use a metaphor, it's kind of like plugging a circuit back together.
Yes,
You can feel that it was supposed to be originally connected.
yes,
It just never got plugged in.
indeed. Right.
And for me, it felt kind of like a click. Like, oh, that makes sense.
Good. I'm so glad that's a gorgeous analogy. Like it was always supposed to be connected.
Mhm.
But yeah, stress and trauma will just, the wisdom in the body will disconnect us temporarily when it's been too overwhelming or we didn't know how to. And you were ready to click back in.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. What did you discover about yourself through your recovery?
It was a deeply spiritual experience,
Yes.
like intensely, and I hadn't anticipated that.
Yes.
And I think for me, I learned that I was so much bigger than what I had been through.
Yes.
And I learned that I'm quite resilient
Oh, yes.
and that I can go through difficult things and get through them.
Yes.
And I'm a lot more, I think, I'm a lot more powerful than I had
Mhm.
first thought.
Agreed.
And I think it taught me a lot about life and myself and others. And I think I live life now just in a deeper way.
Thank you, Heidi. That was really beautifully said. We often come in trying to get rid of symptoms, and we realize it wasn't about that. It
Mhm.
was about fundamental safety and connection. And yeah, that's a very deep process, very unique for everyone. And as we find that and we stay curious, your symptoms just start to melt away.
They do. And I didn't have to do any somatic exercise for me personally,
Indeed.
necessarily. It was more just like opening my heart,
Yes,
and those things naturally started to dissipate without me needing
exactly.
to get involved and like try to rip them out of my body. So,
I know the whole, you're a yoga teacher, which is why I love speaking to you too, Heidi, because you have a sense of the power. And, I'm a yoga teacher too, of when you are in connection with the body and you trust the body, and your mind and your system as a source of wisdom, it will grow the ability to release, to integrate, to process in a way that is very unique for you.
yeah, absolutely. And everyone has that different unfolding.
Exactly. So it seems so odd to me personally to tell somebody to do X exercise for Y symptom because your body is so unique.
It is. I always think that, we didn't get sick overnight
Yes,
in step A, B, C, right? So if you come out of that, it's not going to be in step A, B, C either.
exactly. There's not
So
one way or a best way. There's Heidi's way. There's Nadia's way.
exactly.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I always think we heal in constellations and layers. You're kind of moving around. You have parts of you that might be very young that need care. Your body might release in a certain way or need help in certain supportive ways. You can't know. You have to just stay curious.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, you did that very beautifully, Heidi. Do you remember you had a little hairband was it a hairband that you wrote choice on?
Yeah, I have my bracelet.
I know. Tell people about this because this is great.
So, when I started, working with you, I had a hairband on my wrist that I wrote choice on it
Mhm.
because that's what we were working on at the time, was
Yeah.
understanding that I had a choice
Mhm.
before my body went crazy or I
Indeed.
was met with like a really strong emotion. So I would snap my hairband just to like remind me, kind of wake me up out of that space.
Yes.
And it felt a little bit depressing on my wrist. It was like got really gross. So when I finished my recovery, I bought myself a gold one that says
So
choice on it.
Heidi, it's the most incredible word, choice.
Hmm.
And when we feel so overwhelmed, we often don't notice there is one because we're not like here enough and connected enough, like you said, to your resources, your power. And I watched that grow and your ability to choose. For people that don't know this work yet, Heidi and I worked with a little shape like this
Hmm.
that had the word choice in the corner, which is the present moment. And things would come up from the past because that's the nature of recovery. Patterns in the body, emotions, needs, different parts of us came up in the past. And what the Heidi is speaking about is the choice to respond. And with compassion, with acceptance, with, not completely losing our shit on autopilot like we used to do. And it's a very empowering, very kind thing to exercise choice in how we meet things that come up. I love that you have this now. Does it still give you joy when you look at it?
I do. It's kind of a reminder of like what I've been through.
Mm-hmm.
And even now when I meet situations that aren't even about illness anymore, it's
Yeah.
just like regular stuff.
Mm-hmm.
It always reminds me that I at least always have a choice of my mindset around things
Yes.
and how I carry myself.
Very true. Thank you, my
Yeah.
love. So that's how you deal with life now is, choice and mindset and connection. You came here,
Yeah.
self-connection first. How did you used to deal with stress and emotions before?
There was a lot of meltdowns
Yes.
and breakdowns,
Uh-huh.
and that would be followed with the grand finale of some like terrible health event happening.
Yeah.
It was autopilot,
Yes. I hear
and
it.
that was what I was just taught
Mhm.
at the time.
Yes.
So it was just like a kind of unraveling
Mhm.
in a bad way.
In a way that your system probably modeled or was
Yeah.
responded to, probably a combination of both, right? If we've seen somebody experience big things and they unraveled, or we saw them unraveling in response to ours, that will be all we know.
Right.
Yeah, so I wouldn't say bad, I would say conditioned, and that it makes
Conditioned. Yeah.
sense. Yeah. And yeah, not the most helpful for our sweet body. I used to respond differently. It would be like meltdown and then dissociate. And then,
Mhm.
yeah, huge health implications of that because that's so stressful and so scary for the body.
Right.
So very different now, Heidi.
Yeah. Now there's a pause. This very powerful pause.
Mhm.
It's like liquid gold
Indeed.
of when I'm met with some stressful event, which does happen
Mhm.
still, even after recovery.
I know, shocking,
Um,
right?
even after. Um, there's just this pause where I don't react yet, and
Mhm.
I sit with myself
Yes.
and I feel it in my body first,
Mhm.
and then I feel it in different parts of me.
Mhm.
And now it's more of like a collaboration inside
Yes.
with different parts of me, the
Yes.
emotion, and it's worked out that way
Good.
in a space where I can sit with myself and work through it
Mm-hmm.
instead of, I think, going outside of myself a lot.
Yeah. Good noticing, Heidi.
Mm-hmm.
That's integration, right? When this is happening, it's like a concert in here, and you're the conductor. That you can welcome in the different players of your orchestra. They all have a place, and everything's welcome. And you are still that conductor. None of them are going to drive in a default pattern of response. I mean, we're not perfect. We're all going to trigger sometimes. But what I
Mm-hmm.
hear is the power to pause and help your system organize internally before you take a step forwards.
Right.
Right? It's a very beautiful, powerful thing, and it feels very much safer.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of acceptance I heard of like, shit's going to come up and I'm going to let it be there, and that's okay.
Yeah. It's just the capacity to sit with it.
Indeed.
And it gets bigger over time the more you practice it.
Thank you. It took a while, right? And without any pressure or achievement focus, we were just hanging out with what came up each session. And over
Yeah.
time, this happened, more and more
Yep.
safety. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
You weren't doing an hour of rounds or anything with me a day. I didn't want you to do that. I wanted you to get away from too much rigidity. When I work with people, when they land, there's often alternate rigidity and chaos, and rigidity and chaos. Where we were hoping for and where we aimed for was a little more integration. What were you doing day to day in your recovery and our work, Heidi?
When I was working with you,
Yeah.
yeah, a lot of it felt like, I think, unthawing.
Yes.
I'll be honest with you, I spent a lot of time like pondering my thoughts.
Yes.
And I spent a lot of time just kind of like sitting down with myself in the quiet.
Yes.
And as odd as that sounds, it was actually really helpful.
It's the basis of our work. It doesn't sound odd at all. Everything I do is based on genuine mindfulness, like not analysis paralysis, the genuine curiosity of, how do I respond? What's happening
Yeah,
to me? Like that's interesting rather than trying to fix or force
right.
or override.
I mean, I'll be honest with you, like I didn't do a ton of recovery exercises.
Yeah.
I didn't do any somatic exercises. Like I failed DNRS 100%. Um, and I'm still recovered.
Thank you. You were doing somatic practice, but we didn't call it somatic exercises, and there wasn't rigidity. There was an invitation to connect to your felt experience.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because I know if I'd given you a ton of exercises, you probably, well, your perfectionist might have done them. It probably wouldn't have been Heidi.
Yeah, absolutely. I would have been really good at them, but
Yeah,
I don't know if they would have been doing much for me.
thank you. Okay, it's very important for people to hear this, that there's so much doing that comes from fear. And what
Mm-hmm.
you did was actually more challenging, but more honest of actually, how do I work? What does happen in my body when I'm stressed? And like, sounds weird in this society, yes, but you sat with yourself a lot.
It did.
Yeah. How did yoga help with that, Heidi?
I think yoga for me was and still is. It was like plugging that plug back together,
Agreed.
that circuit.
Yes.
So yeah, it was just, I mean, genuinely about reconnecting with my body. And for me, it was and still is kind of a lot of making peace with it
Yes.
because I spent a lot of time not liking it and trying to control it.
Yes.
And so my practice became something I do out of love for myself to take care of myself
Good.
and not something that I needed to control.
That is for me too, as a teacher and lifelong student, that is yoga. How can I be with myself in the present moment with kindness? And if it's
Yes.
uncomfortable, And if it's different day to day, how can I hang out there and not dominate or colonize my body?
Yes,
Just be.
absolutely.
Mhm. Yeah, as people that were quite dissociated, yoga practiced in this way is such a beautiful medicine. It's like the one of the original somatic practices, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we don't need all the like exciting things and your hand here and your hand here. It's
Yeah,
all set out for you. I'm glad, Heidi, that you have that. It's like a lifelong practice. Are you still doing Ashtanga?
I am. Yeah, I like my yoga a little spicy.
Mm-hmm. It's
It wasn't
you.
always that way, and
Again,
there's
change.
definitely space for other types. But yeah, I am
Mhm.
practicing Ashtanga at the moment.
I love this. I think it suits you, Heidi, that kind of edge to
Yeah,
see. And just it's not from a place of forcing. It feels powerful and it gives you a lot of presence from that challenge.
absolutely.
Yeah, I get it, love. And I'm like, wow, good for you. The practice is beautiful, Heidi.
Thank you.
What have you learned? Valuable lessons like boundaries, not approaching yourself with fixing or forcing, or self-compassion, connecting to feelings, needs to rest. What have been really big lessons for you from our work together?
I think the word that comes to mind is fluidity
Yes,
and letting those fluctuations take place.
yes,
There are days, especially as a yoga teacher, I'm really active
yes,
and I'll come home and I have to take a little nap.
yes.
And I give myself the space to do that.
Great,
And I feel better
great.
after.
Yes,
And then the next day I have more energy, right?
yeah,
And it's just these little ebbs and flows that everyone
mhm,
has with the body.
yes,
And it's about moving with them and not
yes,
against them because at least for me, it was learning that I wasn't here to control my body,
yes.
but I'm instead here to work with it and move with those cycles and waves that we all have.
I love this. I wish you could see yourself when you started talking about this. You started doing this with your body, and then the hands started to go too. And yet, what I hear is those innate rhythms of regulation to trust them and befriend them. You're also in a female body. She has cycles, she needs rests at different times, and that not causing alarm or needing to push through, which is something we could have learned very young.
Right.
Yeah, so fluidity. I love this flow, which is what we get back when we integrate.
Yeah.
Yeah, well done, love. That's a gorgeous lesson. Outside of our work, did anything else support you in your recovery? Things that you enjoyed? Yoga, obviously, physically, emotionally, spiritually. Anything else that you enjoyed as part of genuine healing, not fixing?
Something I do, still do,
Mhm.
that, and I started doing that's a little out there, was meditating and then bringing in the focus of like a higher power.
Yes,
That was really, still has been really helpful for me
good,
as a place to visit guidance, courage, that sort of thing.
good. I'm glad, Heidi. It's not out there. We're not supposed to do this alone, and it's not necessarily religious. It's a sense of greater holding and
Mhm.
greater wisdom that guides and supports us. That as a population, we've fallen out of connection with because we're not in touch with nature. As a highly sensitive person, you have quite a strong connection to that just naturally.
Yes, for
Yeah,
sure.
I'm so glad you do that, love. It's beautiful for people to hear, and something, as you know, I encourage a lot.
Hmm.
Heidi, what would you say to somebody else with chronic illness, trauma-based illness, considering this kind of mind-body, like true mind-body recovery?
When I started my recovery,
Mhm.
I did not think I would get better, but I knew that I'd probably feel 10% better.
Yes,
And when I started to feel 10% better, I was like, maybe I can feel 20% better.
yes,
And then it went to 50, and I was like, well, maybe I can feel 60% better, and then 100. And the point of that is you don't have to make that jump mentally,
Yes.
immediately. If you start this work, you will at least feel a little bit better.
Yes.
And that will give you the encouragement to continue. So, baby steps.
Thank you. I love this. Okay. Again, as an HSP, we have a tendency to hit overwhelm or burnout if we go like balls to the wall. And when you start out, you're scared. I don't know many people that just suddenly believed. It's little bit by little bit that allows you to start to cycle upwards instead of spiraling downwards.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a beautiful message, Heidi. Just baby steps. And if you can feel 10, 15% better from how bad we felt at the start.
That's a lot.
It's a
That's
lot.
a big percentage.
Exactly. Okay. And yeah, it's much kinder than the pressure of, I've got to achieve this 100% recovery. That's just crushing.
Yeah, that's a big jump. And there's no reason that it has to be that big because that's terrifying.
Exactly. And before we started recording, you said, we didn't get sick overnight. We don't heal overnight in this immediacy-based culture and this over-promising packaging healing. I think people put a lot of pressure on themselves.
It is, absolutely.
Okay. Heidi, this is such a hero's journey you've been on. It's a challenge you didn't ask for, but it's one that you have owned. If you could go back to you when you first got sick, how old were you when you first got sick?
I was 15.
Oh, my love. If you could go back to 15-year-old you, what would you want that version of you to know about themselves and their future? What would you tell her?
I would tell myself that you will get better and that you're capable of going through this right now. You will make it. And that everything, all the bad things that had happened in that period will eventually become kind of a foggy, distant memory that we don't have to take with us forever.
Thank you.
And it can be used for strength. And that, yeah, you'll get better and there's hope. And it's never too late to start over and begin again.
Thanks, Heidi. How is it to say that to younger you, knowing that here now you're healthy, well, physically, emotionally, spiritually? What is it like to connect with that very frightened, sick 15-year-old? How do you feel towards her?
I mean, I have a lot of compassion. I mean, that to go through that is just can't even be put into words. And I have a lot of compassion for that part of me and a lot of just love and really respect.
Me too. Me too, Heidi. For all parts of you.
Yeah.
You've been a wonderful guardian for her.
Thank you.
Is there anything else you would like people to know who are still on their way through? If they are considering this, maybe they've done DNRS and maybe they think, neuroplasticity isn't for them. Is there anything you'd like them to know?
I go back to the percentage thing.
Yes.
I say try it out. The likelihood that you're going to feel like 5 or 10% better is quite high.
Yes.
I think this stuff, we're not using medication necessarily that I know of. And it's a very safe, I think, risk-free thing to try.
Agreed.
It's non-invasive and I think it's worth a shot.
Yeah.
And work on those percentages. And I think that when people notice how much better they feel, I think they're really going to be encouraged to continue. But I'd say never give up hope. And I think you can feel in your soul when something's right for you. And if you can't feel that, I think try to get in a space where you can connect to that a little bit to find your path again. But I think if they've made it this far, they're probably sensing that there's something about this path that could be really helpful.
Thank you. Agreed. It's here, right? no one taught us to access it or trust it. I think people do programs out here, and really, yeah, the fact they're still trying, like you said, says there's something in them that knows to keep going.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, we have that little flame that's like, oh, and when we find something that feels a little better, when you found that this was compassion based and much less doing, you felt much safer. And that was a green flag.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I love that, Heidi. Thank you. So, what next for you, my love? In your life, where's your energy, your attention going? What do you want for you in your life now?
For me, it's just building a life I don't have to survive anymore.
Yeah.
A life that I enjoy and doing things I enjoy that like I didn't get to do before. Like I get to
Yes.
travel, I get to eat whatever I want.
Yeah.
I had every food allergy under the sun. I can eat
Mhm.
anything now. Even just like going for a walk. At one point, I couldn't do that, you know?
Yes. I
So I
know.
think, yeah, I just have a lot of gratitude for what I have and just
Mhm.
working on building a future that feels good and doing things I enjoy and just kind of being present with that.
I love this. Heidi, thank you. A lot of presence and gratitude and leaning
Yes,
in. So much of that past is survival, and we didn't even realize how much of our past selves were in some version of fight, flight, freeze, or shutdown. And what I hear is this permission and a very sweet smile as you said it, to lean into what feels good in nourishment, physically, emotionally, spiritually, and just enjoy life.
absolutely.
Yeah, it's not some big secret. We're here to live, right? Everyone's like, what's
Yeah,
the meaning of life? To live.
yeah, not survival. It's you're supposed to be out here, getting the most out of your life and enjoying it too.
Indeed. Heidi, thank you. Any last thoughts or reflections from your time recovering?
Um, Not with me necessarily. I would just say to anyone watching this, like there's always hope.
Thank you, love.
And to just remember that.
Thank you. Heidi, thanks so much for speaking to us today. And a huge well done. It was a joy. And I really mean that, a fundamental joy to work with you and to see you now after we haven't seen each other for quite a long time, to reconnect. It just really gives me joy. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me and working with me. So I really appreciate it.
Thank you, love.